The woman stumbled into Lyndon, Texas, on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, her dress torn and filthy, her face hollowed by hunger that went far deeper than an empty stomach. Penelope Lawrence had traveled 300 miles from Louisiana after her husband's death, only to discover that the cousin who had promised her shelter had moved on 2 years prior. The stagecoach driver had deposited her in the dusty Main Street, with little more than sympathy and directions to a boarding house that no longer existed. Now she stood in the unforgiving sun, gripping a worn carpetbag, feeling the eyes of strangers sweep over her with indifference or worse, with the kind of interest that made her skin crawl. She had not eaten a proper meal in 4 days. Her throat burned with thirst. But it was the loneliness, the crushing weight of being utterly alone in a world that seemed to have forgotten kindness, that threatened to break her completely. She had married young, barely 19, to a man who had viewed her as property rather than a partner. 3 years of criticism, coldness, and cruelty had left her spirit as parched as the Texas landscape. When fever took him last spring, she had felt only relief followed by shame for feeling relieved. His debts had consumed everything, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate hope that family might save her. That hope had died the moment the Lyndon postmaster shook his head and told her that her cousin Rebecca had departed for California in 1876. Penelope's vision swam in the heat. She took a step toward the general store across the street, thinking perhaps she could beg for water, when her knees buckled. The ground rushed up to meet her, and then strong hands caught her beneath the arms, holding her upright with surprising gentleness. "Easy now, miss. I have got you." The voice was deep, warm, concerned. Penelope blinked against the sun and found herself looking up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man who held her wore dust-covered clothes and a wide-brimmed hat pushed back on his head, revealing sun-browned skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges. He could not have been more than 25 or 26, his face lined with the kind of weathering that came from years under the open sky. "I am sorry," Penelope managed, her voice cracking. "The heat, I just need water first, then shade. Come on." Without waiting for permission, the cowboy guided her firmly but carefully toward the wooden walkway that fronted the buildings. He kicked open the door to the general store and called out, "Henry, get me some water now." The storekeeper, a portly man with spectacles, hurried over with a dipper and bucket. The cowboy helped Penelope sit on a barrel near the door and pressed the dipper into her trembling hands. She drank deeply, too desperately to be embarrassed, water spilling down her chin. "Slowly," the cowboy cautioned, crouching beside her. "You will make yourself sick." Penelope forced herself to pause between swallows, studying her rescuer through lowered lashes. His face held genuine concern, no judgment, no calculation. Just plain human kindness reflected in those remarkable blue eyes. "When was the last time anyone had looked at her that way? When did you last eat?" he asked quietly. "I had some bread yesterday morning." She did not mention it had been moldy. The cowboy stood and turned to the storekeeper. "Henry, put together a meal. Bread, cheese, some of that ham you have, and fruit if you have got it." "I cannot pay," Penelope said quickly, shame heating her cheeks. "I have no money I should not have. Did I ask if you could pay?" The cowboy's tone was gentle but firm. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "My name is Jackson Ellis. I work the Rockingham Ranch about 10 miles east of here, and you are Penelope Lawrence." She clutched the empty dipper, unable to meet his eyes. "I arrived today from Louisiana. I came to stay with family, but they are gone. I have nowhere." Her voice broke. Jackson crouched down again, positioning himself so he could look up into her face rather than down at her. The gesture struck her as impossibly kind, equalizing rather than emphasizing her vulnerability. "Miss Lawrence, I can see you have had a hard journey. Right now, you need food and rest. After that, we will figure out what comes next. But first things first, all right?" Henry returned with a plate piled with more food than Penelope had seen in weeks. Her stomach clenched painfully at the sight. Jackson took the plate and handed it to her. "Eat slowly," he reminded her. "Give your stomach time to adjust." She wanted to refuse, wanted to preserve some shred of dignity, but hunger won. She ate carefully, each bite an act of restraint when her body screamed to devour everything at once. Jackson stood and spoke quietly with Henry across the store, giving her privacy. She caught only fragments of the conversation. "Does the widow Miller still take boarders? When she can get them, yes. I will cover a week's room and board." "Jackson, that is generous, but just do it, Henry." Penelope's hands stilled on the plate. This stranger, this cowboy who owed her nothing, was paying for a place for her to stay. Her eyes burned with tears that had nothing to do with gratitude alone. It was the shock of encountering decency after so long without it, like stepping from darkness into sudden light. When she finished eating, Jackson returned. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Miller is a good woman, fair and honest. I have arranged for you to stay there for a week. That should give you time to get your strength back and figure out your next steps." "I do not know how to thank you," Penelope whispered. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "I do not want repayment." Jackson offered his hand to help her stand. "I want you to rest and recover." "Come on, I will walk you over." He collected her carpet bag, which she had dropped in the street, and guided her through Lyndon's dusty roads to a neat white house with a porch wrapped in flowering vines. A woman in her 50s, gray-haired and stern-faced, opened the door at Jackson's knock. "Mrs. Miller, this is Miss Penelope Lawrence. She's going to be staying with you for a while." The widow's sharp eyes traveled over Penelope, taking in the worn dress and exhausted face, but her expression softened. "Come in, dear. You look half dead on your feet. I have a room ready." Jackson tipped his hat. "I will check in on you tomorrow, Miss Lawrence, if that is all right." "You do not have to," Penelope said quickly, though the thought of seeing him again sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "I know I do not have to," Jackson replied, his blue eyes steady on hers. "I want to." That night Penelope lay in a real bed with clean sheets, her stomach full for the first time in days, and wept. She cried for the years of coldness she had endured, for the loneliness that had nearly consumed her, and for the overwhelming relief of discovering that kindness still existed in the world. Jackson Ellis had asked for nothing in return, had treated her with a dignity and respect she had nearly forgotten was possible. She fell asleep with his name on her lips like a prayer. True to his word, Jackson appeared at Mrs. Miller's boarding house the next afternoon. Penelope had bathed and washed her hair, though she still wore the same worn dress, having nothing else. She met him on the porch, suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way her heart had jumped when she saw him riding up the street. "Miss Lawrence." Jackson dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail. "You are looking better. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Penelope admitted. "Mr. Ellis, I want to thank you again. What you did yesterday, paying for my room, making sure I was safe, it meant more than I can express. It was nothing any decent person would not have done." "That is not true." Penelope twisted her hands together. "Most people walked right past me yesterday. You were the only one who stopped." Jackson looked uncomfortable with the praise. He shifted his weight, then seemed to reach a decision. "Miss Lawrence, I was wondering if you might like to take a walk with me. I thought I could show you around Lyndon, introduce you to some folks. It might help you get your bearings, figure out what you want to do next." Penelope hesitated, old fears rising. Her husband had isolated her, discouraged friendships, monitored her every interaction with suspicion and jealousy. But Jackson's face held only open friendliness, no possessiveness or demand. This was an offer, not an order. "I would like that," she said softly. They walked through Lyndon in the golden afternoon light, Jackson pointing out the various establishments and introducing her to the people they encountered. The blacksmith, a massive man named Thomas who had a surprisingly gentle handshake. The doctor, an older gentleman named Samuel Peterson, who told Penelope to come see him if she needed anything at all. The school teacher, Miss Clara Hartford, who mentioned that the town was always looking for people willing to help with various community activities. What struck Penelope most was how people responded to Jackson. Men greeted him with genuine warmth and respect. Women smiled at him with a familiarity that suggested long acquaintance but nothing inappropriate. Children ran up to him without fear, and he knew all their names. This was a man who was woven into the fabric of his community, who was valued and liked. And he was choosing to spend his time with her, a stranger with nothing to offer. "You know everyone," Penelope observed as they paused near the church at the edge of town. "I have lived here since I was 12, Jackson explained. "My parents brought me and my two sisters out from Missouri. They have both married now, moved to their husbands' ranches. My parents passed on about 5 years back, fever. I stayed on at the Rockingham, working for Mr. McAllister. It is good work, good land. I have been saving up to buy my own place someday. I am sorry about your parents. Thank you." Jackson leaned against the church fence, his eyes on the horizon. "Losing them taught me something, though. Life is short and unpredictable. We have got to be kind to each other while we can, because we never know when our time is up or when someone else might need what we can give." Penelope felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of tension she had carried so long she had forgotten it was there. Not everyone thinks that way. "No," Jackson agreed, turning to look at her. "But enough people do. And even when they do not, well, that is all the more reason for those of us who can to step up." They talked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jackson told her about ranching, about the rhythms of life in Lyndon, about the challenges and joys of the work. Penelope found herself sharing more than she intended about Louisiana, about her marriage, though she kept the worst details locked away. Something about Jackson's quiet attention made it easy to talk, his lack of judgment a balm to wounds she had thought unhealable. When he walked her back to Mrs. Miller's, he paused at the porch steps. "Miss Lawrence, I am going to be in town again day after tomorrow. Would you like to have lunch? There is a decent restaurant by the hotel. Are you sure you want to spend time with me?" The question escaped before Penelope could stop it. "You must have other things to do, other people, I am sure," Jackson interrupted gently. "If you are willing, I would very much like to have lunch with you." Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she met his eyes. "Then yes, I would like that too." Over the following week, Jackson visited every day he could get away from the ranch. Sometimes they walked, sometimes they sat on Mrs. Miller's porch and talked, and once he took her to the restaurant as promised. He brought her small gifts, never anything grand or inappropriate, just thoughtful gestures that showed he was paying attention. A book when she mentioned loving to read. A hair ribbon the blue of the Texas sky when she said she missed having pretty things. A jar of honey when she mentioned her tea tasted bitter. Each gift, each visit, each moment of genuine attention fed something in Penelope that had been starving far longer than her body had gone without food. Jackson had a way of listening that made her feel heard, truly heard, perhaps for the first time in her life. He asked her opinions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. He noticed things, remembered details, treated her thoughts and feelings as though they mattered. "Tell me something about yourself that nobody else knows," Jackson said one evening as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. Penelope considered the question, touched by his desire to know her beyond the surface. "I always wanted to learn to ride a horse," she confessed. "But my husband said it was unladylike and dangerous. He would not allow it." Jackson was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried an edge she had not heard before. "Seems to me a husband should want his wife to experience joy, not restrict it." "He was not a kind man," Penelope said softly. "I thought for a long time that was normal, that marriage was supposed to be duty and endurance. Being here meeting you, it has shown me how wrong I was." "You deserved better than that," Jackson said firmly. "You deserve someone who sees how remarkable you are and wants to build you up, not tear you down." Penelope's throat tightened. "Do you really think I am remarkable? I have nothing, no money, no prospects, no family. I am completely dependent on charity." Jackson reached over and took her hand, the first time he had touched her with such deliberate intimacy. His palm was calloused and warm, strong and careful all at once. "Miss Lawrence, Penelope, if I may call you that, you traveled 300 miles alone after losing everything. You survived a marriage that tried to break you. You kept going even when you had every reason to give up. That takes a kind of strength most people never have to discover in themselves." "That is remarkable." Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks, but for once they were not tears of sorrow or relief but something deeper, something transformative. Being seen, truly seen and valued, was changing her from the inside out. She squeezed Jackson's hand, unable to find words sufficient to express what his presence in her life meant. "I would like to teach you to ride," Jackson said after a moment. "If you still want to learn." "I do," Penelope breathed. "I very much do." 2 days later, Jackson arrived at dawn with 2 horses, one a gentle mare named Daisy. Mrs. Miller watched from the porch with an indulgent smile as Jackson helped Penelope into the saddle, his hands steadying her with patient care. The first hour was awkward, Penelope tense and nervous, but Jackson talked her through every step with the same unhurried kindness he brought to everything. "Relax your shoulders, that is it. She can feel your tension and it makes her nervous too. Just breathe, move with her, let her know you trust her." By the time the sun had fully risen, Penelope was walking Daisy in slow circles around the clearing outside town, Jackson riding beside her on his own mount. The sense of freedom, of capability, of doing something she had been told she could not do, filled her with a wild joy she had never known. "This is wonderful," she called to Jackson, laughing. "I cannot believe I waited so long." "You did not wait," Jackson corrected, grinning at her obvious delight. "You were held back. There is a difference. Now you are free to try everything you were denied." They rode for hours, Jackson showing her the land beyond Lyndon, the rolling hills and hidden creeks, the vast sky that seemed to stretch into infinity. He told her about the different plants and animals, pointed out landmarks, shared stories about his years working the range. And he asked about her dreams, the things she wanted to do with her life now that she had the chance to choose. "I do not know," Penelope admitted as they let the horses drink from a stream. "I have spent so long just trying to survive, I forgot to think about what I actually want." "Well, you have time now," Jackson said. "No need to figure it all out at once." "What do you want?" Penelope asked, genuinely curious. "You said you are saving to buy your own ranch. What else?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the water. When he spoke, his voice was careful, as though testing the weight of each word. "I want a home, not just a house. I want someone to build a life with, someone to share the good days and weather the bad ones together. I want children someday, a family. I want to wake up every morning next to someone who sees me as clearly as I see her and still chooses to stay. Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. The way he looked at her when he said, it left no doubt about who he was imagining in that future. That sounds like a good dream. What about you? Jackson asked softly. Do you think you might want those things again? After everything you went through? It was a fair question, a necessary one. Penelope dismounted and walked to the edge of the stream, gathering her thoughts. Jackson waited, giving her space to process. When she finally turned back to him, she felt more certain than she had about anything in years. I thought I never wanted to marry again, she said. The idea of belonging to someone, of being trapped again, terrified me. But this past week, spending time with you, I have realized something. It was not marriage I hated. It was being with someone who did not truly love me, who did not treat me with respect and kindness. With the right person, someone who sees me as an equal, a partner, I think marriage could be everything I once hoped it would be. Jackson dismounted and walked to her, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. Penelope, I know it has only been a week. I know you might think I am crazy for saying this so soon. But I need you to know, in case you have not figured it out yet, I am falling in love with you. Maybe I started falling the moment I caught you in the street. I have never met anyone like you, anyone so strong and genuine and brave. I want to be the person who feeds your soul every single day, the way you have already started feeding mine. Penelope reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling against his sun-warmed skin. I am falling in love with you too, Jackson. It scares me how fast this is happening, but it also feels more right than anything ever has. You make me believe in goodness again. Jackson covered her hand with his own, turning his head to kiss her palm. I will spend every day proving to you that you can trust this. Trust me. I will never ask you to be less than you are. I will never try to cage you or control you. I promise you, Penelope, I will love you the way you deserve to be loved. When he kissed her, gentle and reverent, Penelope felt the last protective walls around her heart crumble. This was what she had been starving for, not just kindness but love, true and freely given, asking nothing but her authentic self in return. They rode back to Lyndon in the golden afternoon light, hands occasionally brushing, stealing glances that spoke of promises neither was quite ready to voice but both understood. The week misses. Miller's room had been paid for was coming to an end, and practical realities pressed in around the edges of their newfound happiness. That evening, Jackson broached the subject as they sat on the porch, the familiar comfort of their talks now layered with deeper awareness of each other. I have been thinking about your situation, he said carefully. You are going to need work, a way to support yourself. Mrs. Miller cannot keep you on without payment. I know, Penelope said, anxiety creeping back in. I have been trying to think what I could do. I can read and write well, and I am decent with figures. I thought perhaps the general store might need help, or maybe the hotel. Those are good ideas, Jackson agreed, but I have another thought if you are willing to consider it. He turned to face her fully. The Rocking M is a big ranch, one of the biggest in this part of Texas. Mr. McAllister's wife, Ellen, has been saying for months that she needs help with the household. Cooking, cleaning, some sewing. She is getting older and managing everything is too much for her alone. They have talked about bringing someone on, but they have not found the right person. I think you would be perfect. You want me to work at the ranch where you work? Penelope's voice rose with surprise. Is that a problem? Jackson asked. I know it means we would see each other often, but there is a separate cabin for the household help, so you would have your own space. The pay is fair, and it would give you a chance to save money while figuring out what you want long-term. Penelope considered this. Working at the Rockingham would solve her immediate problems, and the idea of being near Jackson every day sent a thrill through her that she could not deny. But she also recognized the risk of moving too fast, of building her life around a man again before she had fully found her own footing. As though reading her thoughts, Jackson added, "I want you to know this offer stands whether or not anything more develops between us. If you decide you do not want to pursue this, what we have started together, you would still have the job and the cabin. I would not make things uncomfortable for you, and neither would anyone else at the ranch. You would have a safe place to land while you figure out your next steps." This, Penelope thought, was the difference between Jackson and her late husband. Jackson thought about her needs, her independence, her future beyond him. He was offering her a foundation, not a cage. "I would like to meet Mrs. McAllister and see the ranch before deciding," she said. "But yes, I am interested. Of course. I will arrange it for tomorrow if you like." The next morning, Jackson arrived with a wagon rather than horses. The ride to the Rockingham took about 45 minutes, winding through increasingly beautiful countryside. Penelope watched Jackson handle the reins with easy competence, pointing out features of the landscape, completely at home in this environment. She could picture him here, running his own spread someday, and found herself wanting to be part of that picture. The Rockingham was impressive. A sprawling operation with a main house, multiple barns, corrals full of horses, and cattle scattered across the rolling plains as far as the eye could see. Jackson drove them up to the main house, a sturdy structure with a wide porch and flower boxes that spoke of a woman's touch. Ellen McAllister was a plump woman in her late 50s with shrewd eyes and a warm smile. Her husband, Douglas, was a tall, weathered man who shook Penelope's hand with firm respect. They invited her inside, and over coffee, Ellen explained what the position would entail. "I need help with the cooking, 3 meals a day for the household and the hands who eat up here," Ellen said. "The bunkhouse has its own cook, but we have usually got 8 to 10 men eating at the main house. I also need help with the washing, mending, general cleaning. It is a lot of work. I will not lie to you, but it is honest work and we treat our people fairly." "I am not afraid of hard work," Penelope assured her, "and I can cook and sew well. My mother made sure I learned properly." Ellen's eyes crinkled with approval. "Jackson spoke highly of you. He said you were a woman of quality who had fallen on hard times. We all need a hand up now and then." They discussed wages, which were more generous than Penelope had expected, and Ellen showed her the small cabin that would be hers. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a table, a chair, and a small stove. A window looked out over the ranch yard toward the mountains in the distance. To Penelope, who had spent the last week dependent on charity, it looked like a palace. "When could you start?" Douglas asked as they returned to the main house. Penelope looked at Jackson, who gave her an encouraging nod. "As soon as you need me. Tomorrow, if that works." "Tomorrow would be perfect," Ellen said, beaming. "Jackson can bring you out in the morning. We eat breakfast at 5:30, so plan to be here by 5 to help me get it ready. That will give you time to learn how we do things." As they drove back to Lyndon, Penelope felt lighter than she had in years. She had employment, a place to live, independence. And Jackson beside her, solid and steady, expecting nothing but clearly hoping for everything. "Thank you," she said as they neared town, "for thinking of me for this position, for vouching for me to the McAllisters." "You earned it yourself," Jackson replied. "Ellen liked you immediately, I could tell. Still, you made it possible." Penelope hesitated, then forged ahead. "Jackson, I want you to know I meant what I said yesterday by the stream. I am falling in love with you. But I also need to do this, stand on my own feet, prove to myself that I can survive independently. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Jackson said. I do not want you dependent on me, Penelope. I want you to choose me because you want to, not because you need to. There is a world of difference. She reached over and squeezed his hand, marveling at this man who understood her so completely, who fed her starving soul with a steady stream of kindness, respect, and love. The next morning, Penelope moved her few belongings to the Rockingham. The work was indeed demanding, the days long and physically exhausting, but there was satisfaction in it. Ellen was a patient teacher who seemed genuinely grateful for the help, and the ranch hands were respectful, having clearly been told by Douglas that any inappropriate behavior would result in immediate dismissal. Penelope saw Jackson throughout each day as he came and went from his work. Sometimes he stopped by the kitchen for coffee. Sometimes they crossed paths in the yard, and most evenings, after supper was finished and the dishes washed, he would walk her back to her cabin. They would sit outside on the small porch he helped her build during his free time on Sundays, talking as the stars emerged overhead. "Tell me about Missouri," Penelope said one night, nestled against his side as they watched the sunset. They had been at the ranch for 3 weeks, and the ease between them had deepened into something profound. What was it like growing up there? Jackson wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth. "Green," he said with a slight laugh. "So much greener than here. We had a small farm, wheat and corn mostly. My father worked hard, taught me and my sisters that honest labor was nothing to be ashamed of. My mother was the kindest woman I ever knew until I met you. She could make a feast from almost nothing and always had room at the table for whoever needed a meal. She sounds wonderful. She was. She would have loved you." Jackson pressed a kiss to the top of Penelope's head. "She always said that the measure of a person was not what they had but what they did with it, and how they treated others when nobody was watching." "You are very much her son, then," Penelope said softly. The weeks turned into months. Summer gave way to fall, the oppressive heat easing into crisp mornings and cool evenings. Penelope thrived under the routine and purpose of her work. She and Ellen became close, the older woman treating her almost like a daughter. The ranch hands respected her, and Douglas often commented that the household ran smoother than it had in years. But it was her deepening relationship with Jackson that truly transformed her. He courted her with old-fashioned patience and creativity, finding ways to make her smile even after the longest days. He brought her wildflowers he picked on the range. He carved her a small wooden bird to sit on her cabin windowsill. He taught her to lasso a fence post, laughing with her at her terrible aim. He held her when the memories of her past grew too heavy, never telling her to move on or get over it, just offering his steady presence until the darkness passed. In return, Penelope fed his soul as well. She mended his clothes with careful stitches and embroidered his initials inside his cuffs. She packed him special treats in his saddlebag when he rode out for long days on the range. She listened to his dreams about the ranch he wanted to own someday and helped him sketch out plans for the house he would build. She kissed him under the stars and told him she loved him with increasing frequency and certainty. By the time winter arrived, it was understood among everyone at the Rockingham that Jackson Ellis and Penelope Lawrence were building toward something permanent. Ellen dropped hints about weddings and grandchildren, though neither she nor Douglas had children of their own. The ranch hands made good-natured jokes about Jackson being a gone man, and Jackson himself made his intentions clear. It was Christmas Eve 1878 when he officially asked her. They were in the barn, checking on a mare expected to foal soon, when Jackson took both her hands in his. Penelope Lawrence, I have loved you since the day I caught you in the street of Lyndon. Every single day since then, you have amazed me with your strength, your kindness, your capacity to love again after being hurt so badly. You have fed my soul with your presence, your laughter, your trust. I want to spend the rest of my life feeding yours, making sure you never starve for love or kindness again. Will you marry me? Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Yes, Jackson Ellis, I will marry you. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a promise of all the years to come. When they finally broke apart, Jackson pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. It was my mother's, he said, his voice rough with emotion. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to a woman worthy of wearing it. That is you, Penelope. You are worthy of this and so much more. The ring fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her hand. They walked back to the house together, and when they announced their engagement, Ellen cried and hugged them both while Douglas pumped Jackson's hand and told him he was a lucky man. They married in February 1879, in the small church in Lyndon with half the town in attendance. Penelope wore a new dress, pale blue with white lace that Ellen had helped her sew. Jackson wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving his bride. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed her with such tender passion that someone in the back pews whistled, drawing laughter from the congregation. The McAllisters hosted a reception at the Rockingham, the house packed with well-wishers and the tables groaning with food. Penelope floated through the celebration in a daze of happiness, hardly believing this was her life now. She was married again, but this time to a man who cherished her, who saw her as an equal partner, who loved her not despite her past but including it, scars and all. That night, in the cabin they would share until they could build their own home, Jackson made love to his wife with reverent care, learning her body with patient attention, bringing her pleasure she had never known existed. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Penelope traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. I was starving for so long, she whispered. Starving for kindness, for respect, for love. I thought I would die of that hunger, but you fed my soul, Jackson. Every single day since we met, you have given me exactly what I needed to survive, to heal, to become whole again. Jackson caught her hand and kissed her palm, her wrist, the inside of her elbow. You did the same for me, though maybe you did not realize it. I was not starving the way you were, but I was lonely. I wanted someone to share my life with, to build something meaningful with. You gave me that, Penelope. You gave me purpose beyond just work and saving money. You gave me a reason to dream bigger. They fell asleep in each other's arms, the first night of countless nights to come, and Penelope sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to Lyndon, to Jackson, to this life she had never dared imagine was possible. The years that followed were not without challenges. The ranch work remained demanding, and there were lean times when drought threatened the cattle and tight finances made every decision carefully weighed. But Jackson and Penelope faced everything together, their partnership built on the foundation of genuine love and mutual respect that had characterized their relationship from the start. In the spring of 1880, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mixture of joy and terror. Her mother had died in childbirth when Penelope was young, and her late husband had blamed her for failing to conceive during their marriage, though now she wondered if perhaps the failure had been his, or if her body had simply known better than to bring a child into that cold household. Jackson held her as she cried, overwhelmed by the emotions. "We will get through this together," he promised. "You are strong, and Doc Peterson is the best there is. Our baby is going to be healthy, and so are you." He was right on both counts. In January 1881, Penelope delivered a healthy baby boy after a long but uncomplicated labor. They named him James Douglas Ellis, after Jackson's father and the rancher who had given them both a chance. Jackson cried when he held his son for the first time, and Penelope fell even more in love with her husband watching him cradle their tiny baby with such wonder and care. Fatherhood suited Jackson beautifully. He was patient and involved, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with James during colicky nights, singing surprisingly sweet lullabies in his deep voice. He never treated childcare as beneath him or as solely Penelope's responsibility. They were partners in this as they were in everything. Ellen McAllister doted on James, and Douglas whittled him toys. The ranch hands treated the baby as a communal treasure, and more than once Penelope found one of the supposedly tough cowboys making silly faces to earn a baby smile. By the time James was 2, Jackson had saved enough money to make a down payment on his own land, 160 acres adjacent to the Rocking M. Douglas helped him negotiate the purchase and even loaned him additional money at fair terms to buy starter cattle and supplies. Jackson insisted Penelope's name go on the deed alongside his. "This is ours," he told her firmly when she protested. "Everything we build together." They broke ground on their house in the spring of 1883. It was modest but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen that Penelope designed herself, and a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Jackson carved their initials and wedding date into the beam above the front door. The day they moved in, he carried Penelope across the threshold despite her laughing protests that they had been married for years. "This is the first home that is truly ours," he said, setting her down gently. "That deserves to be marked." Little James toddles through the empty rooms, his excited chatter echoing off the walls, and Penelope felt such profound contentment that she almost could not breathe with it. This life, this home, this family, it was everything she had stopped letting herself dream about during those dark years in Louisiana. Their ranch, which they called the Double E for Ellis, grew slowly but steadily. Jackson worked tirelessly, and Penelope managed the household and the books, her head for figures proving invaluable. She also kept a large garden and chickens, selling eggs and vegetables in Lyndon for additional income. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and getting more so each year. In 1884, Penelope gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace Ellen Ellis, after the concept that had brought them together and the woman who had helped give them their start. Grace had Jackson's blue eyes and Penelope's dark hair, and her father was completely wrapped around her tiny fingers from the moment she entered the world. "2 perfect children," Jackson said, cradling Grace while James slept against his other side. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Penelope corrected, leaning against his shoulder to gaze at their babies. "Or maybe it was not luck. Maybe it was just life finally giving us what we had earned by surviving everything that came before." The children grew, and the ranch prospered. Jackson proved to be as skilled a rancher as he had been a ranch hand, and his reputation for fair dealing brought him steady business. Penelope's soul, once so starved for kindness, was now fed daily by a husband who never failed to show her love, by children who filled their home with laughter, by a community that respected them both. But Jackson never took her for granted, never stopped courting her even after years of marriage. He still brought her wildflowers. He still carved her small gifts in the evenings while she sewed. He still held her close under the stars and told her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. And Penelope returned that devotion in countless ways, both large and small, making sure Jackson knew every day that he was valued, loved, appreciated. In 1887, their third child arrived, another son they named Samuel, after Doc Peterson, who had safely delivered all three of their babies. By then, James was 6 and already helping with small ranch chores, proud to work alongside his father. Grace was 3 and ruled the household with benevolent tyranny, charming everyone she encountered. The Double E had grown to 300 acres, the original 160 plus additional parcels they had been able to purchase as their finances improved. They employed 2 ranch hands full-time and additional help during busy seasons. The house had been expanded to include a 3rd bedroom and a proper dining room. They were solidly middle class, respected in the community, their children healthy and happy. One evening in the fall of 1889, after the children were asleep, Jackson and Penelope sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. Penelope was 31 now, Jackson 33. They had been married for 10 years, together for 11. "Do you remember the day we met?" Jackson asked, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. "Every detail," Penelope replied. "I was so lost, so alone, I thought my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning." She tilted her head to look up at him. "You saved me that day, Jackson, but not just by giving me food and shelter. You saved me by showing me that love could be kind, that partnership could be equal, that I was worthy of being cherished. You fed my starving soul with your love, and you have continued to feed it every single day since." Jackson kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "You fed mine too, Penelope. You still do. Every morning I wake up next to you and wonder how I got so fortunate. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. I will spend every day I have left making sure you never starve for kindness or love again." "I know," Penelope said simply. "That is why I trust you completely. That is why this works. You do not just say these things, Jackson. You live them. Every single day, you prove your love through action, and that means everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had built a life of substance and meaning on the foundation of genuine love and daily kindness. The wind carried the scent of grass and cattle, the sounds of their children's gentle breathing through the open windows, the distant call of a coyote under the rising moon. In 1892, Ellen McAllister passed away peacefully in her sleep, Douglas following her within 6 months. They left the rocking M to Jackson, having no children of their own and viewing him as the son they never had. Jackson was stunned by the inheritance, and he and Penelope discussed at length what to do with it. "We could sell it," Jackson suggested. "Use the money to expand the Double E even more." But Penelope shook her head. "The McAllisters gave us our start. We should honor that by keeping their ranch running, making sure their legacy continues. Besides, this gives us the chance to provide opportunities for others the way they provided for us." So they kept the rocking M, hiring a foreman to run it while Jackson oversaw both operations. And they made a point of offering work to people who needed a chance, who had fallen on hard times, who reminded them of themselves 11 years earlier in Lyndon's dusty street. Their children grew into fine young people. James was steady and responsible like his father, with a natural gift for working with horses. Grace was whip-smart and compassionate, inheriting the best qualities of both her parents. Samuel was still young but showed signs of being the dreamer of the family, always asking questions and imagining possibilities. In 1895, Penelope gave birth to their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Ellen, after the woman who had given them their first real opportunity. At 37, Penelope found the pregnancy more challenging than the previous ones, but she delivered a healthy baby girl with Jackson holding her hand through every moment. "Our family is complete," she told Jackson as he held tiny Ellen. Their 3 older children gathered around to meet their new sister. 4 beautiful children, 2 thriving ranches, a home filled with love. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. "You deserve it all," Jackson replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You deserve this and so much more." The years continued to pass in a rhythm of work and love, challenges and triumphs. The children grew, the ranches prospered, and Jackson and Penelope's love only deepened. They were best friends and passionate lovers, business partners and co-parents, each other's greatest supporters and most honest critics. Jackson never stopped feeding Penelope's soul. He learned her needs almost before she recognized them herself, providing encouragement when she doubted, stability when she faltered, celebration when she succeeded, and comfort when she grieved. He made her laugh, made her think, made her feel valued and cherished every single day. And Penelope fed his soul in return. She was his safe harbor, the person he could be completely vulnerable with, knowing he would never be judged or found wanting. She believed in his dreams and helped him achieve them. She built a home that was a refuge from the harsh realities of ranching life. She loved him with a fierce devotion that matched his own. In 1901, James married a local girl named Sarah, and they built a house on the Double E property. In 1904, Grace married a rancher from a neighboring county, though she and her husband stayed close, visiting often. The house that had once rung with the voices of young children now welcomed grandchildren. And Jackson proved to be as devoted a grandfather as he had been a father. One evening in the summer of 1905, Penelope sat on the porch with Jackson, watching their granddaughter play in the yard while the sunset painted the sky gold and pink. They were both in their late 40s now, graying and weathered but still strong, still vital, still deeply in love. 26 years, Penelope said softly. "We have been together for 26 years. Best 26 years of my life," Jackson replied, taking her hand. "And I intend to have at least 26 more with you. You remember what you said to me that first week we knew each other. You said you wanted to feed my soul every single day. I remember. You have kept that promise, Jackson, not just in the beginning when you were courting me, but every single day since. Even now, after all these years, you still show me kindness and love in ways large and small. You still see me, truly see me, and value what you see." Jackson raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "Loving you has never been a chore, Penelope. It has always been the easiest, most natural thing I have ever done. You are the best part of my life. And you are mine," Penelope replied, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "I was starving when you found me, Jackson. Starving for kindness, for love, for someone to see me as a person rather than a possession. You fed my soul then, and you have continued to feed it every single day since. You saved my life, but more than that, you gave me a life worth living." They kissed as the sun set. Two people who had found each other when both needed saving, who had built something beautiful and lasting through daily acts of love and kindness. The granddaughter in the yard called for her grandmother, and Penelope went to her with a smile, Jackson following close behind. The years ahead would bring more joy and inevitable sorrow, more challenges and triumphs, but Jackson and Penelope would face them all together, feeding each other's souls every single day, proof that love rooted in genuine kindness and mutual respect could not just survive but thrive across a lifetime. Their story, which had begun with a woman starving for kindness and a cowboy willing to offer love, became the foundation not just for their own happiness, but for generations that followed. Their children learned from their parents' example what healthy love looked like, and they built their own marriages on similar principles. Their grandchildren grew up surrounded by the evidence that devotion and daily kindness mattered, that the small gestures of care accumulated into a life well lived. The double E and the rocking M continued to prosper under the Ellis family's stewardship, becoming known throughout Texas as well-run operations that treated their employees fairly and contributed generously to the community. Jackson and Penelope's reputation for helping those in need became legendary in Lyndon and beyond, as they never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, to need kindness and find it. In 1912, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary surrounded by their 4 children, their children's spouses, and 8 grandchildren, with a 9th on the way. The house was chaotic and loud, filled with laughter and the pleasant disorder of a large, loving family. After dinner, Jackson pulled Penelope aside to the porch, their refuge for so many years. "Happy anniversary," he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. Penelope opened it to find a leather-bound book, its pages filled with Jackson's careful handwriting. "What is this?" "Our story," Jackson explained. "I have been writing it down over the past year, everything I remember from the day we met until now. I wanted our grandchildren and their children to know how we started, what we built together, and why it mattered." Penelope paged through the book, tears streaming down her face as she read Jackson's account of their first meeting, their courtship, their struggles and triumphs. He had remembered everything, recorded it all with honesty and love. "This is the most beautiful gift you have ever given me." "Read the last page," Jackson urged. Penelope turned to the final entry, written just that morning. "After 33 years of marriage to Penelope Lawrence Ellis, I can say without hesitation that catching her as she fell in the street of Lyndon, Texas, in August of 1878 was the single most important moment of my life. She was starving for kindness, broken by a cruel world, and I was given the privilege of feeding her soul with love. But what I did not understand then, and what has become clear over these decades together, is that she fed my soul just as much. Love is not one person rescuing another. It is 2 people choosing each other every single day, nourishing each other's spirits, building a life of meaning together. Penelope, if you are reading this, know that I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, more than I did yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Thank you for falling into my arms and then choosing to stay there." Penelope closed the book and kissed her husband with all the passion and tenderness of their decades together. Inside the house, their family celebrated, but here on the porch, it was just the 2 of them, as it had been so many evenings before. 2 souls who had fed each other with kindness and love every single day, building something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. The stars emerged overhead, familiar and eternal, bearing witness to a love story that had begun with hunger and been satisfied with daily devotion. A testament to the transformative power of genuine kindness offered and received, of 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed to become fully themselves. Jackson Ellis had promised to feed Penelope's starving soul with love every single day, and he had kept that promise faithfully across more than 3 decades. And Penelope, Lawrence Ellis, who had once been so broken she could barely stand, had blossomed into a woman of strength and grace, using her own healing to help heal others, proving that love rooted in kindness could redeem even the darkest past and build the brightest future. Their story was complete, not because their lives were ending, but because they had achieved what they set out to do all those years ago on a dusty Texas street. They had found each other, chosen each other, and built a life of substance and meaning together. They had raised children who understood the value of kindness and passed that understanding to their own children. They had created a legacy not of wealth or fame but of love lived out in daily action, and that legacy would endure for generations. As they sat together on the porch, hands intertwined, hearts still beating as one after all these years, both Jackson and Penelope knew with complete certainty that they had lived exactly the life they were meant to live. She had been starving for kindness, and he had fed her soul with love every single day. And in doing so, they had both found the truest form of happiness, the kind that comes from giving and receiving love freely, daily, and without reservation. Their story, born from a moment of need and compassion on a hot August day in 1878, had become a testament to the enduring power of love to transform, heal, and sustain across a lifetime.